Theater. All right. All right. Great. Well, welcome everyone. This is Return to Voices of the Earth, Journeys of the Mystics. We have been doing this as a free community webinar for on and off for about 8 months now. So really excited for our journey this evening, taking a look at the Ogham of Prince Edward Island with Anne-Marie. And so a few things that are important to note as we're moving through the journey here together this evening. Again, I would just ask that you have your devices on mute until the end when we will ask questions. So if you think of questions while Anne-Marie is speaking or even later, there's two options to get those over to us. One would be just remember them or write them down so that when we get into our discussion at the end, you can bring them up. And also, you can put them into the chat. So if this is your first time using Zoom, if you take your cursor on your screen and hover down to the bottom of the screen, you should see a little green bar, especially on if you're on a computer. And then underneath of that green bar, there's a little button that says chat. So if you click on that, you can chat either directly to someone. So if you want to ask me a question, or Anne-Marie or Steve or somebody else that's in the room that you know, you can direct a question or a conversation just to them, but it'll be just kind of a rolling tab of everything that is happening. So again, questions at the end, making sure you're on mute. So again, welcome December 7th, 2023, and the beginning of our journey here together. I always like to start things off with a little quote. And so one of my favorite authors and keeper of the Celtic Twilight, at least one particular branch, Ella Young. Since we are here this evening in respect to the home, I thought this was just a beautiful way to span the worlds and take a moment just to slow down, quiet our breath a little bit, anchor into the earth, in presence to this time that we have together. While we may be all over the United States and Canada, we get to be here in a circle this evening and listen to the journey of Anne-Marie and dive in. Ella Young, I know a forest, the roots of it go down deep, deep into the heart of the earth. The branches of it are spread among the stars are the fruit upon its branches. The leaves of it make a singing in my mind. I'm sure everyone here who has had an opportunity to really connect with trees has probably heard that song themselves. So this evening, I'm going to introduce our team and our presenter tonight. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the home, just to give a cultural context, especially for those who may not be as familiar with it, and set the plate for Anne-Marie, who will then take up the heart of our time together this evening with her lessons from the trees, where she'll be sharing some of her art and her journey. Then we'll close it with a few invitations of some things that are up and coming, and then have plenty of time for questions and reflections at the end. I will be watching the time so that we make sure we do have time for that. And then we will close for the night. So once again, thank you all for joining us. So first and foremost, to introduce our amazing team of people here this evening. So Anne-Marie Dunphy, she reached out to me, gosh, back in June or July, and she had just picked up Steve's book, The Celtic Tree Mysteries, and had a blast with it, and found each other, and we started working on basically what she's going to be presenting this evening. So Anne-Marie is a Prince Edward Island tree mystic, and I think the heart of things really, though, she is a lover of trees, and she has spent her life journey meandering the pathways, both known and unknown, the pathways of spirit, the pathways of dreaming, the pathways of faith, and exploring traditions that help her to access and connect with them. She's a Qigong practitioner, a yoga instructor. She's done over 1,000 hours of training in yoga instruction. She loves to meditate. And as you will all see tonight, she's an artist and a fantastic storyteller. So then to introduce my friend and mentor, Steve Blamires, also an author and a guide to all things Celtic and Gaelic. Thank you, Steve, for joining us tonight. I think more so than anything, Steve is one I would consider a way shower, someone who is willing to sleuth out and find new places, new mysteries, new trails to pick up and follow. And then he likes to burrow into it and turn up all the juicy goodness that comes with that. But more than anything, Steve is not only is Steve an author, but Steve has also been asked to represent the Celtic nations and Celtic spirituality on multiple world forums throughout his career, and has also been guiding people around to amazing places on this planet for 40 plus years. And then of course, there's me. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a professional ecologist, wetland scientist, GIS specialist, but also with a very strong focus on the Celtic mysteries. I lived in Ireland for in 2005 doing ecological restoration and planning projects, as well as having very long weekends to explore the Celtic mysteries, to sit with some of my teachers and friends over there, and more than anything, an ecopreneur. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open things up. What is the Ogham? That's the big question. Not Ogham, it's the Ogham. What is the Ogham? The Ogham, I'm looking here over the falls of Down the Hierarcha Forest in the southwest of Ireland, where the ancient oaks and ash and pine twine together as one by this gorgeous, gorgeous waterfall in the Kilmacolly Reeks in the Killarney National Forest. A gorgeous place to get to know the trees. But what is the Ogham? What are we diving into tonight? What are we looking at besides what Anne-Marie found with her journey with Prince Edward Island? I think first and foremost is to have a cultural, historic, and prehistoric understanding. So we have in the ancient archives of Ireland from the Book of Ballymount, from County Sligo, where my people come from in the west of Ireland, we have a gorgeous, gorgeous ancient volume that shares a lot of what we know about the Ogham today. So that gives us a little cultural context, but a little bit more of the essence behind the Ogham. The Ogham is often referred to as the Celtic tree alphabet, and or the language of the forest. Now, to kind of like open that up a little bit more, like each of the Ogham has its own primordial sound, and the Celtic or the Gaelic languages are some of the oldest languages on the planet. So similar to Hebrew or Arabic or Sanskrit, Hindi, etc. A lot of these ancient languages, they're very close to the core of a culture's evolution in respect to a landscape, to the ecology, to the hydrology, vegetation, the animals, etc. And so the sounds that formulate the very words themselves are very directly connected with both the physical, the seen, and the unseen, that which is felt, vibration and felt. So one of the heart languages that gets into the truth of it. But the way that we frame out our concept of the Ogham now is in respect to these various symbols or flasks, these markings that are in the white in some of the backgrounds of some of this art here on the screen. But each of the Ogham is connected to one of the 20 indigenous trees to Ireland and Scotland. And so these trees, and some of them aren't technically trees, some of them could be shrubs, some of them even debatably are either vines or even one of them, Zistref, or the rushes are, of course, an herb. Here kind of like is a very gentle painting of what those look like in respect to. So each of those original letters or those markings that speak to a certain sound in the language itself is associated with a specific tree. So if we start in the top left, we've got birch, rowan, alder, etc. And so we've got them grouped in these families or these activities, these clans that have relations and how they fit into the ecology of Ireland or of Scotland proper. And one thing that I want to reiterate that's really important here is that when speaking in the Gaelic, in Irish, when speaking in Scotch Gaelic, when we're speaking in these ancient Celtic languages, we're literally speaking a forest, because the combination of all the letters, or going back pre-writing, the sounds that are uttered are the primordial sounds of the trees themselves, from which our ancestors drew their entire language base. So it's a really gorgeous tie-in. Maybe Steve will talk a little bit more about that later during our Q&A. We've had some great conversations around that in the past. But again, just wanting to frame things up. Where we find most frequently, with at least what is left to us in the 21st century, a lot of times are ancient standing stones or lentil stones that are part of megalithic temple complexes, part of cairns, part of entrances to holy sites. And of course, they have various things that are written on, standing stones that are standalone features in the landscape. Angel and Maggie, I believe, are both in here. Thank you for showing up on this picture as well. But oftentimes, in a modern context, there's some indication for historic context as well. There's an understanding of how trees might fit in with various parts of the year, various seasons, various ancient deities or saints. And some of these, if you really got into the nitty gritty, you can really see why it might make sense. Like willow, a lot of times willow is already starting to bloom in February and early March. And so there's you can start seeing some of the connections, even just in the morphology that the plants themselves exhibit in the landscape and throughout the year. Here's our grove. We've got 20 trees. And so, as I like to frequently say, I hope you can find a mystery to climb every day. Here's 20 trees that we can climb. And this is what Anne-Marie set out to do, was to connect and climb the mysteries of the 20 elm trees in respect to Prince Edward Island. All these great mysteries and sources of stories to follow. And then in the sense of a codec, something that encodes information, you can store a lot of information in respect to each one of these trees. And then each one of them becomes like a door, a key, and a way to open up into a mystery or something even deeper. And maybe if we want to just put aside the word mysteries for a moment and just say, it is a way to connect with reverence and awe and wonder at the beauty of this world again, and then to perhaps learn something new about ourselves and our environment. Yay! So much to explore. All right, so in simple essence here, each tree gives us an opportunity to bridge the worlds. It's a mnemonic, a way of storing vast amounts of information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anne-Marie to open her journey in respect to lessons from the trees. So Anne-Marie, are you ready to go? You might be on mute.
Thank you. Yes, I'm ready. I'm excited.
All right, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Oh, it just happened.
I will say that I had so much fun working collaboratively on this project with Anne-Marie. So I'm very excited with what she will share tonight.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you, everybody, for your time and attention and taking time out to be here and to take an interest in this little project. I want to say welcome to Prince Edward Island. It is the smallest province in Canada. And let's just say on average, we have a population of about 200,000. So some of you have suburbs bigger than that. And of that, let's say that at least 30,000, well, over 30,000 people trace direct ancestry to Ireland. And then many of us who are from away, as they say out here, can also trace our Celtic roots. So I am going to ask that we, as Jeremy said, we're going to hold questions to the end. I won't be looking at the chat, so if you're putting that in, maybe just direct it to Jeremy. I won't go into that place. And so I want to invite each of you to just, you know, get a little comfortable, snuggle in a little bit, grab that cup of tea, maybe allow me that storyteller's leeway as we begin and explore this beautiful adventure of the heart. I'm going to be sharing with you through images, through mixed media art, and through words, as authentically as I can, that which I experienced directly from the trees and the lessons that I pulled or were revealed to me. We're going to hear about some magic. We're going to hear about some time standing still. And we're going to share lessons that I never anticipated when I began this. So I first heard that beautiful word of Ogham, which I think is how I said it to Jeremy the first time I talked to him, because I hadn't heard anybody say it before. So I was like, okay, it must be Ogham, okay, or Ogham or something like that. But I first encountered the word in this book, To Speak for the Trees. And upon finding the word, I was immediately struck. I've always been a lover of trees, but somehow in discovering that there was a whole Celtic alphabet of trees, or a whole culture, you know, related to trees, and a whole group of people that shared that love, was really fascinating to me. And she does a great job in her book of describing this is at the end, this isn't the main piece of her book, but she does a great job in her book of describing all of the different trees, the 20 different trees, and presenting them, and the 20 kind of well known or well understood aspects of the trees. And so from there, I did go on and I gobbled up Steve's book. Okay, so thank you, Steve, for all that time writing that book, because I gobbled that one up too. And I was like, wow, where does this come from? How do people know this? How do people know what these trees know? And as I kind of really sat down to sort of study the books, something began to happen. Something magical. And you can't see this one very well, but that's when the Ogham was alive. It really became alive for me. It is alive and it is well. But with a big, beautiful swipe of a branch, it clearly said to me, no books. No books. And that the way forward then was to simply be really learning directly from the trees. And as someone who has trusted that kind of information that presents itself, I trusted that as well. So I put the books back on the bookcase and closed the Kindle edition and put down the highlighter and picked up the boots and picked up the other pieces of things. And what I'm going to present to you tonight, as I say, are the lessons from the trees. And I'm going to present them in the order in which I met the trees for the most part. Maybe a couple little changes. Again, storyteller's license here, but a little bit of a switch. So from Steve's book, Steve led me to Jeremy, which led me to this, because in the beginning I was like, oh, the symbols. I know you can't see this very well, but it was all about the symbols and the letters and the common tree name and what the Irish name was and the Irish pronunciation, which I won't even try, and then breaking down the genus and the species and what might that map to here on PEI. And I have to say, Jeremy was very patient with me because I don't have any kind of background. I don't have any background either in the Celtic mysteries, and I don't have any background in terms of ecology. You know, before this, I was lucky if I could tell certain trees from apart. So here's the spreadsheet set out in a different way. So again, this was another presentation that just sort of moved through me in terms of, okay, so if we look at what the trees are in their original place, what might they be here on PEI? And you'll see that we had different, you know, we had suggested with the willow, well, it could be potentially a white willow, or it could be potentially the pussy willow, or with the European ash, could be the white ash or the black ash, etc. So you'll see that there was different variations that were also possible within this. And then I just started to meet the trees. Yeah. And the first tree I met back in 2021, I actually don't have a picture of it, but the very first tree I met back in 2021, so before this project actually began, or perhaps when the project actually really began, depends on how you look at time, was a very small English oak, tiny. And I found myself falling to my knees in front of that tiny little oak on the edge of the forest. And that was enough to even stop me from just kind of going about my day, recognizing that, oh, this beautiful tree just dropped me to my knees. This tiny sapling. And later in the same forest, Strathgartney Forest here, I rounded the corner and there was this spectacular bounty of apples. You know, I know in one conversation with Jeremy, he said, well, did you eat one? And I thought it never even occurred to me. I mean, he asked the question, it's an obvious question, but of course, never even occurred to me. I was just so awestruck. It's just like, oh my goodness, would you look at this? In the middle of the forest, there's all these apples. And so every time I've encountered an apple, and there's lots of apple trees out there, crab apples, apples, I just call them apples. I'm always just filled with delight. They stop me in my tracks. And words that come to me as I sort of visit with them include things like bounty, generosity, delight. And yet you'll see that the word I settled upon was sustenance. And so the lesson for me from the apple has been that sustenance, that love and joy, that bounty, that delight, actual food. Always a pleasure, always a delight to find the apple. Ah, the white birch. Ah, the white birch. Again, 2021. Again, okay, maybe a little outside of the boundaries of the project, or again, single night and a single day, perhaps the beginning of the project was all the way back here. But we were out on an outing, and you know, I got separated from the group, which is my way, and you know, I like to go my own way, so I went my own way, and I encountered these trees, and I've been known to hug a tree or two in my day, and so even though it was cold, I just went right ahead and wrapped my arms around this tree. And as I waited, you know, just kind of whispering sweet nothings, if you like, to the tree. And then when I felt, you know, okay, that's good. I started to move away. I started to unhug the tree, if you like, or to begin to let go of the embrace. And I was amazed to discover that I was instantly pulled back. And I was like, okay, this tree's hugging me back. I mean, come on now, this tree's hugging me back. How amazing. How no words. And so the lessons I pull back from the tree, the lessons I pull from the birch without hesitation is connection. Connection, mind, body, spirit, soul. Whatever your word is for it, whatever your words are for it, your entire being. But connection to a force that until then had been words, you know, and became very real that day. And of course, there's nothing more beautiful than coming across a stand of white birch when the moon is full. The rowan, also known as the mountain ash. We're going to have a longer stop here with the rowan, mostly because, my goodness, what an adventure. What a doorway into magic this tree turned out to be. How could I ever have known? So by this point in time, Jeremy and I had met. I'd done all that great work on the spreadsheet. I mean, actually, it's Jeremy's spreadsheet, but I had done some great work on it too. So, you know, great collaboration. I was feeling okay, good. And I was like, okay, well, you know, if I'm going to go down this list and I'm going to meet them in order, right? Because that's what we do, right? You know, you got to meet them in order and you got to go follow the spreadsheet, and that's what we're supposed to do. And so I was like, okay, well, where am I going to find a mountain ash? Where am I going to find, you know, a rowan tree? And I'm driving, and it was as if the rowan tree just simply wrapped itself around the road and pulled my attention over to it. And it was so big. It's such a, I've never seen a tree this big. And as you can see, it's probably several trees that have all just grown together. They're collaborating right here and creating this beautiful kind of hand or resting spot or whatever, perhaps even a cauldron. I don't know. I just know that I was like, wow. And so, um, you know, when I had the opportunity to go over and visit with the tree, and it's really literally I can walk here from the house. I had to dig my way to it, so it was covered in, it's got lots of companion plants and, lots of rose bushes that I had to get through. And I met a frog along the way, and we had fun, and, got my way into this beautiful spot. And I was just, again, I was just amazed. And kind of one of the things you should know is that, of course, with every visit, I'm very respectful. I mean, and so I asked permission to visit with the tree, and of course, and I think the tree was actually a little surprised that there was someone wanting to visit because it had been in this kind of abandoned area for a while. And so I hopped up in there. So usually I would sit, but in this particular case, I was actually standing, and I was leaning against one of the branches, or sorry, one of the trunks that you can see up there. And the energy was so very gentle. The energy flow so very, very gentle. And I had an injury to my foot, and somehow the tree kind of knew that and was like, here, let me help you with that, and put your foot over here. And so I did, and that continued to unfold as the rest of this unfolded. And as that gentle energy continued to really flow all of its own accord, I really had a sense of being in a different dimension. The word soul was dancing through me. Actually, there was just that energy, that very gentle, soft energy. And then all of a sudden, little sensing of a voice, can you see me? And I was like, sorry, you'll see me look away, because it's just a natural reaction, because that's where they showed up. And I was like, yes, I can see you, but I can't see you like I see the tree. I can see you, but I can't see you like I see the tree, but I see you. And kind of a little bit of a giggle, and then they wanted to play a game. And I'm like, okay. And I just said, Faye, and they said no. And here's another mispronunciation. Everybody ready? Said he, or she as it's properly pronounced. And it's sort of like, yeah, kind of, but not quite. And then this little became quite big, and then got very little again. And I said, shapeshifter. And then again, yeah. And so all of a sudden there was this shapeshifter playing with me on a branch, getting big and getting small and getting big. And when I say big, I mean, 3 to 4 feet tall, standing on a little branch. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. Like that's amazing. And then I said, for some unknown reason, I got a sense that the shapeshifter was young, although I'm not sure I would agree with that anymore, but that was my initial impression. And I was like, well, uh, should you be going home? Like, is your mom going to be looking for you? Is your mom going to be looking for you? Should be heading home? And yeah, kind of a little shrug of the shoulders. And then, all of a sudden, back to a small form and walking off the branch, you know? And that was the visit with the Rowan. And again, it was like that long energy, the deep energy, that connection through the white birch, which was, well, that was just something in words until it wasn't. And so for me, the shapeshifter was always interesting, always fascinating, but something in words until it wasn't. And I got to go home that afternoon and have a big long nap, which is always a treat for any of us. And I know that I dreamt of dragonflies. I know that my entire dream after that visit with the tree was filled with dragonflies. And I really did have a sense that I had, had a peek or saw. And while I've labeled it here as magic, in honoring, I would like to say that I honor and recognize the rowan as the tree of the good folk. And later, so not the same day, a few days later, the shapeshifter gave me a gift. So actually, sorry, I should say the shapeshifter showed up in the garage. And the shapeshifter gave me a gift. And the shapeshifter gave me this beautiful little bottle of blue effervescent liquid. And I wasn't really sure what to be doing with it, but the shapeshifter said, "Oh, just put it right in here. Just put it in your heart." I did. I think it was a love potion. I certainly do know it was magic. And the shapeshifter is still around and will appear again in our story and our unfolding, but still currently likes to visit in the garage and likes to hang out in our recycling bin, particularly the paper. Okay, so. This is a beautiful forest, Culloden Forest here. And as many of you may or may not know, we had Hurricane Fiona. I don't care if you call it a post-tropical storm. It was a hurricane for those of us that were here. And the damage is significant. And before Hurricane Fiona, these white pine had two other friends. And this white pine is really what's there now. And I know that as my husband Rick and I, went to visit, this is a property we visit regularly. I think we were both heartbroken to see the trees gone. And to really see some of the destruction. So much so that we actually hadn't been back for well over a year we didn't go back in the aftermath of Fiona. So just this past September was our first time back after Fiona. And as I sat, though, on one of the logs from one of the fallen, actually the trunk of one of the fallen white pine, there was again that slow, delicious energy. And I really had to not impose what I thought that tree might be experiencing, and rest instead in that deep, long energy forms. And it was so strong. I mean, here's a down tree that's been down for a year, and the waves of energy so very strong. And the tree itself quite content. The tree showing all the different things that were happening. The roots exposed, therefore the network, the communication network, the roots there to be seen, the new growth of fungi, the remaining forest had already swallowed most of the top of the tree, and new growth all around it. And so in that place with the white pine, really, really standing as a tree, really that reminder that being that connection, top to bottom, bottom to top, heaven to earth, earth to heaven. Standing as a tree. Ah, the trembling aspen. Yeah, I didn't get a really close up on this one. I was just too mesmerized by the rustling of those leaves. You know, if we could see them. They're, I mean, so visually they're so wonderful. And then along with that, the sound as the wind moves through them. And so much of what we'll be seeing from here on out is taking place in a local park. So Robert L. Cotton Park is a park here on Prince Edward Island that was founded by a wonderful philanthropic individual businessman here on PEI. And he had actually gone and served in the war. And while he was overseas, he in England, he became quite enamored and with the public gardens. So he really worked hard to bring that back. And Robert L. Cotton Park was actually the home of a nursery, so a tree nursery. So he had started a tree nursery. And then when he realized that so many other commercial nurseries were coming into play, he turned it into a park. And it's a beautiful park. It's, again, within walking distance or a 2-minute drive. Okay, maybe a 5-minute drive if I take my time. And within the trembling aspen, you know, as I connected and asked permission, and as I sort of settled in and rested, what was so lovely was that tendency to evaluate and analyze just fell away. And it was as if the tree reached out and just sort of took that away and said, let's just let it be for right now. Let's just sit. And there was this tremendous, beautiful stillness, effortless, really. And time lost all meaning here with the aspen. All meaning. While there's always a sense of kind of the timeless with all the visits of the 12 trees that I've visited with so far, none more so the distinction here being within the aspen that time lost all meaning. Time completely lost all meaning here with the tree. And a deep stillness within. So the trees rustling and the leaves are going and the wind's blowing and everything's moving. And so suddenly, you know, in the heart of all that, there was this absolute stillness. I think that it was a crow that brought me back. And it was almost as if the crow was saying, okay, time to go. Time, get on there. Time to go. Okay. You're going to get lost if you stay here too long. So just keep moving. It was a beautiful experience. Ah, the northern red oak. So many of the trees here, so PEI was known for their northern red oaks, and the island was pretty much decimated for the shipbuilding industry. And many of the northern red oaks were gone as part of that process. But there's one piece, so this is separate from the Cotton Park. We're now at Canavoy Oaks, a protected area. And there's a tree there by the name of Jeremy, and I sort of had hoped to meet Jeremy. Or sorry, Jeremiah. My apologies. I've met Jeremy. I had hoped to meet Jeremiah. So he's a tree there, and I had hoped to meet him, but of course I didn't know who he was or what he was like. And I should mention now and pause for a moment and say, okay, so the rowan tree that you saw earlier is in an area of land that is being created into a subdivision. And so that giant rowan is in danger of being knocked down. So as much as I have advocated for several of the trees in that area, um, there is a risk that it's going to end up coming down. And so the shapeshifter was concerned that the home, that particular home was going to be gone. And so before we set out to go to Canavoy Oaks, the shapeshifter wanted me to drop them off at Jeremiah. And so I said, of course, pop into my coat with me and off we go. So, okay, so hold the shapeshifter for now and let's come back to the oak. And we walked in and didn't sit with the big tree at the big oaks. This area is beautifully covered in oaks. But further into the forest. And as I sat with the tree, the tree was constantly showing kind of, usually when I sit with the trees, my eyes end up closing, but for this particular sit, my eyes sort of stayed open. And I began to notice a caterpillar on a leaf. And the light was shining, and the caterpillar was there, and the wind was blowing, but the caterpillar was still holding on, but I could only see the shadow of the caterpillar. And there was kind of this question of, well, what's behind? Sorry, what's behind? What's behind? What's behind? What do you see when you look behind? What's behind? And so it was a lovely visit with the caterpillar and continued to walk on. And you kind of felt myself kind of scratching my head from that particular visit, and started walking back towards the vehicle. And all of a sudden this happened. That light, that light just shone through. And I have to say that, as I sit down, to do the collages and, you know, um, I just allow the images to kind of present themselves. And I have to say, sacred was a word that came through, and, light was a word that continued to come through, because what happened, what was behind was the light. And yet it was the word illumination that I'm taking from my lesson from this tree. Um, I still love visiting with an oak. They're They're deliciously slow moving energy. I think at times surprised when a person stops by for a visit. Oh, wait, I am sorry. I'm sorry. What happened to the shapeshifter, you're asking yourself? I know you're asking yourself that. Well, walking back past where the leaf and the light and everything else and came to that other big oak, and I like to tell myself that that was Jeremiah, but I'm going to have to go with somebody who actually knows where Jeremiah is or do some more research on that. But beautiful, massive oak. And when I approached the oak, both the oak and the shapeshifter were like absolutely delighted. Absolutely delighted. Old friends meeting again, reunited, delighted to be together again. Not a moment's hesitation. And, a gentle wave, and, that was it. All right. So I should mention that by this point in time in the project or in the lessons, I have completely dropped any illusion that I am going to find the correct trees. So all the hard work that Jeremy and I had done to identify the correct trees is now gone. I'm no longer trying because I was driving myself nuts. If you had seen me, I was underneath trees. I was measuring them. I was actually trying to figure out how old they were. I was like, oh my goodness, you're 74 years old. How amazing is that? Oh, you look like you're about 130. Oh, that's fantastic, And then I was like, oh my God, you're not the right willow. Oh my goodness, I can't sit with you. And then I said, how ridiculous is that? Like, truly, come on now. How ridiculous is that? You're a willow. Okay, just because it says it on a piece of paper. Let's okay. So what was the new experience for me with the willow was I certainly didn't bring myself to this willow. So we're back at the park now, and I certainly didn't bring myself to this willow. I assure you. I've been through the park many times, visited the park all the time long before this, regularly sat with a red pine and still do. But I dropped, parked the car, grabbed, grabbed what I needed, locked the door, and my feet were taking me to this particular spot in the park and to this particular structure. So I say structure because this willow has been woven into like a dome, a beautiful kind of dome. And there's two kind of entrances. So there's one, I could get in and you can sit inside it. And then there's another one where somebody could crawl through. It's really quite lovely. But it was my feet taking me to the tree that I was like, okay. Somehow that's what freaked me out more than the shapeshifter. I was like, my feet took me to the tree. What was that? I don't understand. How did I get here? What was that? So I just enjoyed a small visit with the willow. And then I went along and sat with the red pine. So there's a beautiful red pine by the water, and there's a beautiful branch, and I'm able to actually climb up into the tree and sit with the tree. And while I was doing that, I began to notice that old memories began to float up and fly away, and perhaps different things that have been troublesome or perhaps less than positive experiences began to return, and then somehow they were unwinding. It's the best word I can give to it. This beautiful sense of unwinding. And when I've been back to visit with the basket willow, that same sort of experience of this tremendous unwinding. And while I could say the word medicine, what I experienced was pain relief, and not of the physical kind, but of that sort of, the other levels, the inner levels. And I was like, because I was sitting with the red pine when this sort of really began to happen, I was like, so red pine, is this you? And the red pine was like, no, this is the basket willow. I guess if I was to put another word on it, it might be assistance. That ability to just kind of be and rest and know that there's assistance. We're gonna leave the oh, Jeremy, am I over? Are we good? We're okay? Okay, okay. So we're gonna leave the park again for a bit, and we're gonna go to the Auburn Woodlot here on Prince Edward Island. And the Auburn Woodlot is another area that was surprising how much destruction had happened. The woodlot here, so much destruction. There had been beautiful trails through the entire woodlot, gorgeous area to go walking in, and so many spruce. And so there was a lot of sadness approaching the area again, and then going into it, finding actually a little section of it that had survived, and this beautiful spruce. I mean, they're all beautiful, but this one in particular, I don't know. This one was very open, and there was so much peace. It was so peaceful being with this spruce and watching and just noticing the birds, playing, and um, so much activity. So, you know, that's not often the case here all the time here on PEI, and even in Canada, I know that from American friends who come up, they're always like, well, where's all the wildlife? And it's like, well, we got a lot more space for them to hang out, so we don't get to see them quite as much. But it was a delight that day to just sort of be in that whole space. And really, that beautiful white spruce, that deep resonant peace, that here and now, not somewhere else, not waiting for something, not looking for something else, but just this beautiful sense of peace resonating right there in that moment. A sense of curiosity from the owl, the full moon. Of course, that beautiful old vintage Canada stamp with those spruce trees going by the lake. I know you can't see it as well. But peace here, now. Ah, have you had the pleasure of visiting with a white ash tree? Oh my goodness. It's like visiting a party in full gear. It unbelievable. Seriously. So welcoming, so inviting. Like, come on in, hang out. Where are you going? What, you don't want to go see that oak? No, 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 no. Come on back over here, hang out with us. Yeah, that maple tree's all beautiful, decked out in those gorgeous colors, but no, 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 come on back. Hang out with us. I cannot tell you the sheer absolute welcoming energy of a white well, uh, oh wow. I think that if you waited just a little bit in the quiet, you could probably hear laughter and stuff and music going on in the vicinity of the white ash. Truly. And so if I was to say, and again, I know nothing of these things, so Steve and Jeremy and all of you, but if I was to say, if the rowan was the tree of the good folk, then the white ash for me was just full of fae. I couldn't help it. There was honestly a party going on and so welcoming. And not in that, not in a crazy way, but just in a, yeah, come on, hang out. What'd you do today? Tell me what happened. Truly. And so the lesson that I took from the white ash is merriment. And I assure you that's not a word that's in my vocabulary. That's not a word I use regularly. So it was like, okay, this is coming from the tree because for sure, don't know merriment. I mean, I know happiness and I know craziness and stuff, but merriment? What a word. Mm. The rose. So, as Jeremy said in my journey, my meandering, I would definitely say that in the last 4 years, one of the sort of touchstones that has guided me has been this kind of echoing mantra of always the trees, or your path is through the trees, or your way is through the trees. And so this shot epitomizes for me kind of that beginning of that journey, sort of, yep, there's still some path down the road, but here's this beautiful rose that's just inviting me to rest, and just inviting me to rest. And there's that old saying, right? Like stop and smell the roses or whatever. And I was like, okay. But yeah, it's just a beautiful sense of resting. And I will say there's an alchemy here within this whole process, but definitely here within the rose. Sort of an alchemy of the heart as we kind of rest in the heart. Just resting in the heart. There's a sweetness to it, isn't there? And the second to last that I met was the Canadian yew. And this was a very energetically, this was a hard tree to rest with. I could feel the pulling in my chest. I could feel kind of that grief. I was in many ways captivated by the skeletons of the leaves So there seems to be something about the Canadian yew that's able to just sort of capture these leaves as they fall, and then they kind of begin to break down. And what remains within the yew is the sort of skeleton, if you like, of the leaf. I had 4 older brothers. I have 3 now. Lost one just coming up on a year now. And yet, within this tree and within this resting, a very real experience of the kind of transmigration of the soul. And the yew, the kind of cradle of grief for those of us still here. That kind of upside down heart feeling. And so as I left the yew, and as I say, it was a difficult sit. Not difficult, and it was just difficult. And with what I was being shown, what I was being taught. But as I left the yew, and we're late in the season now, and I assure you that here on PEI, there should not have been any of these ripe and ready to be eaten. But as I left the yew, and again, my feet took me to these raspberry bushes in the park and brought my attention here to the raspberry bushes. And, you know, that remembrance of life before death and that ability to find precious things when least expected. And I assure you, I ate every last raspberry I could find anywhere in the vicinity. Okay? Because this doesn't happen. Ah, the hawthorn. Who knew? And with such a simple name as the common hawthorn, no way. Nuh-uh. I need a name change on that one, please. Who do I write to? There is nothing common about this tree. I assure you. I mean, come on. I know she doesn't have her green leaves on and her berries, but look at those tiny, beautiful little thorns. Look at how she's just woven together in this way. How spectacular, truly. And of course, I was like, oh, look. My goodness, you're gorgeous. And so, oh, the energy that just comes off that tree in waves. If the white ash is about that merriment and there's that party going on, then the hawthorn is all about nurturing. I cannot say it enough. And I don't normally, bow to the royalty, but I would definitely, this is a royal tree in my books. Nothing common about her. And for me, she is the queen of nurturing. And so as I sat with her, as I sat with her and as I sat with her, because she was one tree that I had to go to over and over again, because I was like, I do not understand this energy. I don't understand this. I don't understand this lesson. I don't understand what you're showing me. I don't understand what you're showing me. I really don't understand what you're showing me. I'll come again. I still don't understand what you're showing me. I get the royalty. I get that there's something here. I get how spectacularly beautiful you are, but I don't get I don't get it. And then all of a sudden that recognition that my goodness, it's not that it's not that I don't it's not that she wasn't sending it out in waves, it's that it was so uncommon to me. And for those of us who have had trauma in our lives, sometimes nurturing can be one of those things that we just don't recognize. And that was the case for me with this tree. I did not recognize that the energy that she was just sending out wave after wave after wave of this nourishment, of this nurturing. Ugh. And I do know that one time when I did approach her, I did find myself on my knees, but not in the sense of anything, not like the experience with the oak where I was just, fell to my knees. It was just like, oh my goodness, perhaps a sense of surrender this time, or a sense of, I don't know, maybe, you know, I, I don't know, more mystery here. And now a tree that we shouldn't find on Prince Edward Island, a tree that is not necessarily part of the 12 that I have met. But this beautiful man, Robert Cotton, and of course the gentleman that he brought over to manage the nursery, they planted dawn redwoods. Like, wow, that's awesome that we have redwoods growing here on PEI. And as I sat with these trees and visited with them, because there's 3 of them, but there's 2 here that are close and their branches intertwine. And as I sat with these, I really encountered all of my teachers, all of them through the ages. And there's been so many. And I want to acknowledge Diana for her book, Steve for his, Jeremy for his delicious collaboration and being willing to let me throw away that spreadsheet. And of course, most of all, I want to thank the Ogham and all the trees that I have had the incredible adventure to meet. And of course, one last tree who insisted on being included, even though she was not recognized in any of the trees from Ireland, but she would not be left out. So this beautiful maple glory. And I say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for allowing me to share with you this beautiful adventure and the lessons from the trees.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Gosh, just a breath of fresh air. I'm thinking of the first few times that I went scuba diving and how I was just in love with the wonder and awe of a whole new world that I didn't know. And I didn't want to know the names of anything scientifically or even common. I just wanted to be floating in kelp forests and surrounded by giant fishes and mammals that I didn't know or I could pretend to know, and just the majesty of opening that. So it's just really refreshing to have this sense of wonder and awe for something I'd be like, well, that tree, we could talk about 400 million things and about how it's connected, and just so thank you. Thank you, and thank you everyone for riding with this amazing story that she had. I think in a sense it invites all of us into a return to innocence. So I want to close out with a couple of invitations here, and then we're going to have a little bit of time to have a roundtable conversation before we close out for the evening. So first and foremost, our next time that we gather will be on January 14th for the next episode of Voices of the Earth and Journeys of the Mystics. And we're going to be talking about walking the Irish Camino, so some of the great ancient roads that I'm working on with several organizations in Ireland to reconstruct over the winter, and a bunch of us will be walking that pilgrimage this coming summer. So join us on Sunday, January 14th. We'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern. That way we can have folks joining us from Ireland as well for this one. Also, and just to put it in front of you again, this is Steve's book in respect to what we were diving into this evening with the Ogham. This book is also what bridged Steve and I together 4 or 5 years ago. It was out of print, and some of the folks that are here on the call were looking for copies of that. And so with it being out of print, I chased him down, and now that book has been reprinted, and so it is available again to the public via Cross Crow Books. You can find it about anywhere online. And then my next book on Aisling, or on the dreams, as we would say in Irish, is going to be coming out in this coming February. So more to come. And then so let's go ahead and open up the floor here for questions and reflections. I'm going to turn off the screen share. And I think the first thing that I want to do is to give Anne-Marie, give you a little pause for a second and give Steve a chance to speak in here. So Steve, I've got a couple of questions for you. First and foremost is, back when you wrote this book, no one was writing anything about them, and not very many people knew anything about it. What drew you to bring this to the light into the late 20th century and now into the 21st century?
I don't really remember, because it had always just been with me. I mean, Jeremy and I and some others went to Scotland last year, the year before, and I'm from a small island, the island of Arran, which does have trees, and we stopped and I showed you the house where I grew up. So my background was the Gaelic language and the open spaces, but I became very interested in the Arthurian legends, which are incredibly intense. But somehow I'd never heard of Ogham, so I don't even remember when or where or how. But I started to realise that there's a lot of trees were named in the old legends, and I was quite thorough in trying to make sure that any written version of any legend I could find was as close as we could make it to the original tellings, including things that seemed wrong. And maybe Jeremy maybe knows about the Irish Text Society. It's a hard thing to say, but they publish very few volumes, but the ones they do are very academic, and that is exactly what I needed. And so I actually wrote a book. Jumping around here, the first book I wrote was inspired by the fact there is no Celtic creation legend, and that had always fascinated me. Almost every religion, every mythology starts with, this is how we're all here, and then blah, 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 blah. Well, there's none. There is no Celtic creation legend. The closest I could find to it was the Battle of Moytura, which is when the gods and goddesses came to this earth. Well, we were already here. Human beings were already here. They were already wherever they had come from. it didn't really matter because the Celtic view is that time just is. The past, the present, the future are all together. So when you ask me things that happened in the past, I don't really understand what you're talking about. Anyway, I got down to it and I realized that these trees, specifically naming a tree, it's not a code. I mean, it's the only word I can use, but it's like that. The yew tree just covers so much, and it's telling you what is happening in the story. Any of the myths, not just the Battle of Moytura, it is telling you so much about what is about to happen or what has just happened, all in one word. And to jump way forward, in 1993, last century, I moved to the United States, and I cannot connect with the trees here. I never really was great at sort of connecting in the Gaelic area, but I thought I should really try this because people kept saying, "Oh, you're the Scottish guy who wrote that book. So what about the trees here?" And I said, "Well, you know what? They're trees. They're big planks of wood standing up, and I get nothing from them." And it wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It was just, it's like saying, picking up a book that is written in Swahili and then coming back to expecting it to have changed. Well, no, it's not going to change. You can learn Swahili and find out what it's saying. And it was just such a daunting task that I thought, I lived in California, the warmth of California. I lived in Alaska. I lived in Washington State. I'm now in New York State. And as you know, Jeremy, I've traveled literally all over the world. So it's not just this one little isolated thing. It's this is what it's supposed to be. That these trees tell you something about what you are looking at in a piece of literature. Now, there is nothing to stop anyone going out and doing what you're doing, and it's fascinating. And I really, really envy. Like hang on a minute. No, lost my trail. But the knowing what these trees mean in the Celtic, the Irish, the Scottish, the Gaelic legends opens up so much more. And I realised that the Ogham, the alphabet, in many ways is separate from the Ogham written just by the name of a tree. So, for example, you know, if somebody came in to Jeremy's house right now and walked up to him with an apple, well, in the legend, that would mean this person is not human. The apples are the sign of the other world. So what is about to happen between this person and Jeremy is now happening in the other world, in the world of the Schewe. So instead of having to put all those words together to explain what's about to happen, just say, and if you, I don't know how many legends you know, especially Arthurian legends, they are full of King Arthur having a feast, and a maiden, usually, sometimes a knight, would come in with an apple or a branch of an apple tree in blossom. And everything that's happening from there on is in the other world. And the academics, and I mean literally the academics who were studying these things as ancient medieval documents, got totally confused because this Jeremy had died two chapters ago. Now suddenly somebody's appeared with an apple to Steve, and Steve and Jeremy are now back together. Well, yes, but in a different place. So a lot of the Victorian translators decided to correct these things. They said, "Oh, well, there must be a chapter missing. How can this guy have died? And now he's alive again and probably going to die. There's a chunk of this book is missing." Well, okay, no, you just don't understand what you're actually reading. And I thought, this is just so difficult to explain in one volume, and even in one of these amazing sessions, that I just decided to put things together and try and form format it into a book that people could read. And really my intention with that book was read these things. And I give a bibliography of, good translations that are worth reading, and read them in face value. And if from your readings a tree or trees happen to stand out at any particular point, and you know where they are, some of those trees, then go and meet them. And I was very lucky. I think I probably mentioned this to you when we were in Catacall in Arran, at the house where I lived, up the glen of the Wildcats, Catacall. There is a stand of a completely unique rowan tree that you only find on Arran, and it's got deer fences round it. It's not marked on any map, and nobody can quite explain why that happened and how it got there and what does it mean. Well, one of the things about Arran is, its old name was Evan Avalok, which is basically Avalon. Avalon. Evan is twins. Avalok was of the apple tree. So I was just growing up with all this stuff round about me, and it really did start to sort of overwhelm me. Well, okay, what do I do about that? So as I say, I started writing books, and then of course you find out, there's other people who are interested in these things, and it's just all sort of led on from there. Sometimes I have to check the botanical trees, actually for different reasons. But one thing, you start, Anne-Marie, you started off with the apple, which the apples we have today, and that photograph actually is excellent for what I'm about to say. At the time of King Arthur or the Celtic people or the gods and goddesses, there only was really one in our countries. I don't know about United States. You can maybe find somebody who does. But it was just a crab apple. That's all it was, which you don't eat. They're horrible. They're tiny, they're hard, they just rip the mouth out of you. So why were these people appearing with these flowery plants that were just like a temptation to poison yourself? And it was just because you're going to go to another place where everything's reversed. So it will actually taste very sweet in the other world. And that sort of got me thinking, okay, if I can find out about some of these trees, and then of course that brought me to the Ogham alphabet, and set off all sorts of things. And it's interesting you came up with the yew tree. I don't think it matters if it's common yew, Canadian yew, Joe, the guy downstairs, the smell of his boots, yew. It's a yew tree. It's a symbol. That you don't look at the Mona Lisa and say, look at all that paint. Look at all the paint all over it. No, look at the picture. So the yew tree in Scotland, there is a yew tree still alive today, which is probably about 2,500, 3,000 years old. It's still alive. And it's in a village in Scotland which had a very, very famous person born there that nobody has ever met from our generations, but Pontius Pilate from the Bible was born in Scotland inside of this yew tree, and probably as a kid played on that yew tree. And if it hadn't been for him, he was picked. He was a Pict. The Pictish people had names beginning with P, Pontius Pilate, which is the Latin version of it. The Roman army, the Roman civilization, had spread this far at that time, and they would recruit young men to go in the army, but to fight away from their own country. If you have somebody fighting within their own country, they're more liable to be attached to the country feeling than they are to the army. So he ended up over in Judea and became the governor, very important. And when Christ was brought before him, he sentenced him to death. So the whole connection with death is there, but it's a death that brings something much, much more with it. And again, the easiest way, if you can encapsulate that into one word, then you can get through a book and it will take you a long time trying to put it all together. And I'm still sort of doing it. I've given up. And this is not, I'm not saying this in bad mood or in a bad way, but I realise I can't spiritually, emotionally connect with the trees, the actual plants here. But it doesn't bother me, and I still go home quite a lot. Home meaning to Scotland quite a lot, and sometimes I feel absolutely nothing there either. But that's okay, because that's not really why I'm doing it. If it does happen, certainly I take note of it and appreciate it. But I'm just trying to wedge open the connection between the plant, what it actually signifies, and the modern legends, the modern stories. And the hawthorn is interesting because in the Gaelic language, which is the Scottish language, and the Gaelic language, which is the Irish language, they're very similar, but they are not the same. The H is not a letter. If you take, if I open that up, this dictionary up to the area for, there is no entry for H. There is no word begins with H. So how have we got a hawthorn? It begins with H. But that in itself is the joke, because the only purpose of the H in the Gaelic and Gaelic alphabets is to change the pronunciation of the letter before it. So if you have an M, it's If you have an MH, it's V. So it's a way, there's no V, there's only 18 letters in the Gaelic alphabet. So we had to make double letters for V, W, some of the sounds, which is why there's 20 trees, and they cheated a little bit. There should only be 18 trees, but they had 20 because it actually made it easier for an alphabet. So they had a couple of diphthongs in there, and it works. I mean, it works. So the hawthorn tree is almost something like, whatever you think you're going to get from me, you're going to be wrong, because I am representing something else. So it gets very complicated, and I'm very lazy. And when it gets to that part, I think, I wonder what the letter C is doing today, and I'll go off and find, something. I think humour is very important in this thing, because the trees play some great jokes on us all the time. And I think Tolkien got that to a very great extent. And some of his stuff is really worth interesting. When you look at the trees in the book, you suddenly start finding, oh, I didn't know that was there. So I'll stop. I've said enough.
Thank you, Steve. Very grateful for that, for your share. I just want to give everybody the heads up. It is just past when we said we were going to close. So if anybody needs to go, feel free, but we are going to stick on for a little bit longer just to allow for a few more questions. I think the thing that I would like to pivot off of the back of what you were sharing, Steve, in the sense of having trouble connecting with the trees. So now I want to go back over you, Anne-Marie, and say, Anne-Marie, how are you connecting with the trees? Like, maybe share a little bit about what that looked like for you. You're muted.
Well, you just walk up to them. It's as simple as that. I mean, no. Okay. It is in some ways for me, and maybe because it's been cultivated over time. Like I think that in some ways, I've been visiting with that red pine tree for some time now. And so, when I first started sitting with the pine tree, okay, so let me even back up even a little bit more than that. So trees recognize us. Trees can come to recognize us. Trees can sense us. And so I think that as we allow ourselves, but maybe they're a little shy. And as we allow ourselves to, sit and visit with them, without having an expectation, or without having no, without asking, but rather just being with, then there's an easiness that comes over time. And so what I would do is I would always ask permission. So if I'm approaching a tree and I'm not sure, I'll just ask. I'll just, may I visit with you? You know, can I come sit with you? Can I meditate with you? And, can I join with you in meditation? And from there, there will generally be a sense of it. So if you're not hearing the actual word yes or no, or of course, or whatever it might be, then there'll be a sense of that. And so from there, then, and if it's a no, I don't push it. I'm not gonna, that's disrespectful. So I'm gonna, move along. And that does happen, by the way. So please know that no's happen, or nothing happens as well. So like there's no communication whatsoever. So not every tree is as open or as willing to communicate or open to communication. And then when I do approach the tree and they say yes, then generally, if I'm going to climb the tree, I'm going to ask, is it okay if I climb you? Like, is it okay if I climb up here? And usually they're like, yeah, come on up. Yeah, no problem. Or but generally I tend to just sit with the tree, so putting my back against the trunk of the tree. So I do find that having your back against the trunk of the tree, your bottom firmly on the ground and nice and comfortable, and whatever else works for you, whether it's legs out or anything else like that. And then the process is really quite simple. From there, if you've practiced any kind of meditation, then it's really just kind of about, okay, just breathing and then allowing yourself to get comfortable and let whatever arises arise. So as much as possible, not imposing anything on it, if that makes any sense. Just staying open to whatever arises and not drawing any conclusions in that moment. Like, so whatever it might be further on. Is that good?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
great.
helpful? Okay.
And part of why I asked that is, like Steve, in your book
Yeah.
multiple times, you speak to that, like coming to the tree and listening. But I think at one point a few years ago when you and I we were talking, and we were mentioning the idea of, well, what about just going and telling a story to the tree? And so this whole process that Anne Marie and I went through over the summer months, and as she ripened it then on her own through the fall, really got to come to see that come to play in the journey that she had, which is part of the reason why I was so excited for her to share this with everyone tonight. Very, very exciting time. And I think, Steve, I remember you, is there anything that you would want to say in respect to that in this?
No.
Okay, yeah, I think perfect. Just what so one of the things that we have also talked about, which I think is a great way to reflect on language, connection, tree, with the stories that are emerging, are the stories that come from actually reading the trees and the landscape itself. And we've shared some stories in the past about some funny things that you've seen, sort of planted, written as people have planted trees to write something. You want to share a little bit about some of your experiences with that? I mean, it doesn't, whatever you want to take with it, but just seeing the Ogham come alive through the landscape.
Yeah. When I'm in an area of trees, wild trees, in Scotland and Ireland, has been hugely denuded, but there are still places. And the tree, they're just all all mixed up. But sometimes I'm taking groups. I used to work with National Geographic, and I would be guiding people who were really not into this sort of thing whatsoever. But I was there, and I was just enjoying myself. And I would just be looking at the letters of the trees and making up anagrams. And on the island of Skye, they opened a new, well, this is a long time ago, but they opened a new visitor centre, and it was all laid out in a big car park. You know, there's lots of tour buses go in there, and so it was kind of bleak. You know, it was like asphalt and a building. And the kids from the high school in Portree and Skye said, "Well, why don't we, you know, get some plants in there?" So, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And I don't know who said it, but somebody said, "Well, why don't we just plant the Gaelic alphabet?" And I thought, yes, that's a great idea. And of course, when you think about it, some of the, you know, some of the plants, it doesn't really matter. And I knew they had built this place. I didn't know about this, the tree aspect of it. And so when I was quite excited to take a little group to the new building, and it actually had bathrooms, which the old one didn't, and stuff. And I was standing by the bus with the driver, letting the people look at what they're looking, and I'm just looking round the parking lot, and I thought, hang on a minute, BLFNSA, you know, and I thought, that's the alphabet. And the woman who was at the pay desk, but you know, selling the souvenirs in the building, it must have been watching me, and she didn't say, she didn't ask me who I was or what I was doing. She just walked up to me and she said, "You're the first person that's ever noticed that." Then went back into the building. There's also on Arran, where Jeremy and I have both been, there was a chap moved up from England and really didn't get living on an island at all. It wasn't because he was English, but it was just like, why did you come here? And there was a falling out with the neighbour, which just doesn't normally happen in these small communities. And the neighbour wanted to put up a hedge. And so this guy reluctantly said, "Well, okay, but you're paying for it." I said, "Yeah, I'll pay for it." But he put up plants which were not a hedge, which spelled out something really, really rude about this guy. So all the people in the village would walk past and be laughing at it, and this guy had no idea that he was being not humiliated, but he was being encouraged to look at, maybe you should be changing your point of view. You've come to us, you know. And so you could, and sometimes, you know, I've heard in conversations that somebody's trying to sum up something complex, and very often in Gaelic and in Gaelic, you'll hear people speaking, and they'll just suddenly give an answer in English, because actually the English words for this particular situation are better than the words in Gaelic. And I have, it's dying a lot now, but I have heard in the Western Islands, where the Gaelic is the first language, people just get frustrated about trying to explain something, and they would just go like, "The apple tree." "Oh, I've got you. Yeah, right." You know, so it's still used. What I don't understand is, why did an alphabet come from this?
Yeah.
And why is it only used on marker stones? There are no, you cannot write a book in, oh, you know, think about, just think, try and do it. It would be so huge, literally huge, because of the number of strokes, and it would need to be up and down. I mean, you can't do it. But you can carve it on an upright stone, which is really quite easy. But it's just a small point, but I've always had a feeling there is something that we are all missing. We have this alphabet. It's nothing to do with like the Viking runes or anything. It's only related to trees. It's only related to carvings on stones, and almost all those stones are men. What is this? Because if you take the trees of those names, you can't make a story from it. So I just concentrate on not the actual notches, not the actual carvings, although they're very relevant. When a tree or one of the 18 shows up in the alphabet in in a story or in a name or in some weird way. I think that this is important. But I do like to be amongst the trees. I work a lot in Antarctica and in the Arctic, and being so tree oriented, being there is is utterly refreshing. I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to be working down in Antarctica for a while. There's no trees. What am I going to amuse myself with? And it was just so refreshing. And the penguins just look at you like and go away. Nobody cares about anything, and there's almost no plant life. So, and then the same in the Arctic, it's a bit different. But it's almost like it's a place on our planet where I wish everybody could. I wish everybody could at least once go to Antarctica, because when you're like a group like us who have all this interest in all these things, and to be in a place in the same planet where you will find absolutely nothing of it. At first seems terrifying, it sounds horrible. It's not, it's just so refreshing. You can look at this utter majesty of ice and be in tears at the beauty of it. And I can stand and look at a stand of trees and be equally in tears. How can that happen? How can you be looking at these wondrous plants and being overwhelmed with what they are, what you know about them, and go to a place where none of them will ever grow, it's never been there, there are no leaves, and have the same effect? It's wonderful. And there's a friend of mine who always talked about remembering forgotten simplicities. And I think that's really all we need, that there are very old things that have been forgotten that are very simple, but our modern mind saying, well, if it's simple, it can't be all that useful. What good's a simple thing? So let's start to ramble a bit here, but
Oh, it's
anybody who's got my book, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course.
The 10 cents royalties are going into a little jar next to my bed when I get them.
So I want to close out shortly here, but I want to turn it back over to you, Anne-Marie. And you shared this lovely story of this Ashleen, this fey being that helped thread together different parts of your being. It helped connect you to different trees and in the learning process. But more than anything, it gave you this gift. It gave you this gift. You described it as a little blue or a little vial that was blue or something like that. So to close this out for the evening, what I'm curious about is where, you said that it was placed into your heart. So how has that changed your journey in life? How is that still alive in you?
What a delicious question. Thank you. Um, it has been truly a gift. In in the sense that in these moments, there's moments that we tend to forget, right? Like there's moments that we just tend to forget. Like we get busy, or we get upset, or we get angry, or we forget this other dimension. And I know that that's been one piece of the puzzle, is that there's seemingly that ability to stay more remembering, or to be able to hold it and be with it. But I would say, Jeremy, that it's really made me stronger. And as an example, I think back even 2 years ago, when I would not have been able to speak to any of you about any of this. This is probably the most open I've been about my own personal spirituality ever. And so I think that that is a true testament in some ways to what that beautiful blue liquid has done, and what that shapeshifter has done and has offered, has been that ability to have confidence, to stand and to be authentic, and to welcome the opportunity, you know, to be with like-minded, like-hearted, like-spirited people, and to just share what the adventure was. Whether I understand it or not, whether I sound crazy or not, whether I do or I don't, whatever, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Beautiful. Wow. May the light of Erin ever be strong in you and continue to grow and weave you into fantastic groups of human beings. So thank you. It has been an absolute joy to work together this year, Emery. And Rick, thank you for letting us borrow her for a little bit. Really appreciate it. So everyone, thank you. Steve, thank you so much for joining us this evening and bestowing so much deliciousness upon us. And I thank you all.
Yeah.
And I bid you all good night, and hopefully we'll see you all on January 14th.
Okay, good. Thank you. That.
Thank
Thank you.
you.